Today, we're exploring something fizzy, foamy, and a little puzzling if you've never grown up with it. What exactly is root beer, and why is it called beer when it usually contains no alcohol? If you picture a frothy pine beverage at a pub, you're partially right, but not entirely. Root beer is a fascinating blend of American nostalgia, herbal tradition, and clever marketing, all wrapped into one sweet, spiced, and bubbly drink. So, let's dive in and uncover what makes root beer. Well, root beer, at its heart. Root beer is a soft drink, traditionally crafted from a combination of roots, barks, herbs, and spices. Its flavor is truly unique, sweet, and earthy, with hints of vanilla, wintergreen, and licorice. Depending on the recipe or brand, you might also detect notes of cinnamon, nutmeg, anise, or clove. And if you've ever enjoyed a root beer float with ice cream, you know the creamy, foamy magic firsthand. But here's the twist. Modern commercial root beer rarely uses actual roots anymore. Today's mass-produced versions rely on artificial flavors and sweeteners to replicate the traditional taste. Yet, the essence remains a dark, sweet, slightly spicy soda, unlike anything else on the shelves. So, where did this unusual drink originate? Root beer has literal medicinal roots. Before it became a soda, it was an herbal remedy brewed at home. Early Native American communities used roots and herbs, including sassafras and sarsaparilla, for their perceived healing properties. European settlers later adopted these traditions, creating their own brews that often served as tonics or teas. By the 18th and 19th centuries, these brews evolved into low-alcohol drinks called small beers, a general term for homemade beverages made from herbs, barks, or even bread and molasses. These drinks weren't for celebrations, they were safer alternatives to untreated water. Among these concoctions, the sassafras-based brew stood out, eventually becoming what we now know as root beer. This is where confusion often arises. Despite its name, most root beer today contains no alcohol. Originally, however, it was lightly fermented, much like ginger beer or birch beer, which is why it earned the beer label due to its brewing process and fizzy character, even if it wasn't intoxicating. When commercial bottling began in the late 19th century, fermentation was mostly eliminated to make the drink safer and more stable. Still, the name stuck. Calling it beer gave it an adult edge, even though it remained sweet and kid-friendly. During Prohibition in the United States, the name's boozy stigma faded, and root beer became widely embraced. Modern root beer owes much to Charles Hires, a Philadelphia pharmacist in the 1870s. Hires believed in the healing power of herbs and roots and developed a powdered mix that, when boiled with water and sugar, produced a flavorful root tea. He began bottling it for wider distribution and called it Hires Root Beer, despite it being completely alcohol-free. Hires thought the word beer would appeal to working-class men, many of whom enjoyed beer, and he was right. His root beer quickly became popular, especially among those seeking alternatives to alcohol. By the early 20th century, root beer was a staple at soda fountains across the United States, with brands like A&W, Barks, and Mug soon entering the market. Each offered its own twist, some creamier, some spicier, but all maintained the core profile, sweet, foamy, and lightly herbal. A defining flavor in early root beer came from sassafras, a North American tree. Its root bark gave the beverage a distinctive aroma and taste, one many still associate with classic root beer. However, sassafras contained safrole, a compound later found to be carcinogenic in lab animals. In the 1960s, the US FDA banned safrole in food and drinks, prompting manufacturers to reformulate with artificial flavors or safrole-free extracts. While some argue modern root beer lost part of its character, others appreciate that today's versions are safer and more consistent. Craft root beers, however, often strive to replicate that old-time flavor as closely as possible, minus the safrole. Root beer is primarily a North American phenomenon. In Europe and Asia, its flavor can seem strange, even described as toothpaste-like or medicinal, largely because of the wintergreen or menthol notes. Still, it has a cult following among American expats and adventurous food enthusiasts. With the rise of craft soda, interest abroad is slowly growing. In short, no. What began as a lightly fermented tonic has transformed into a fully non-alcoholic soda. The word beer remains historical and stylistic, a nod to its origins. Alcoholic versions exist. Some modern craft brewers produce hard root beers, but these are specialty items, not the everyday beverage you'd find at the store. There you have it, the quirky, sweet, and storied journey of root beer. It's not quite tea, not quite soda, and certainly not beer in the modern sense. Yet it carries centuries of herbal tradition, a name preserved through marketing, and a flavor that continues to intrigue. Whether you love it or find it puzzling, root beer captures a unique slice of American culture, reminding us that even the simplest things, a fizzy drink, a label, a taste, can have surprisingly deep roots. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories hidden in the smallest details.